Welcome back, Helldivers. Today I want to speak about the patch notes. I'm not going to go through every single line. I will link another YouTuber down below that goes through the patch notes as they read, but I mainly want to focus on significant changes or impactful changes, things that I think will maybe impact what you put into your loadout. There are plenty of things I think that were okay before and are still okay, so they haven't really changed that much. There are things that have been significantly negatively impacted, and there's some things that have been positively impacted. So let's go through it. Okay, so the first one's a little bit sneaky. They adjusted how much force is required to stagger hulks, and I was thinking, what is that going to impact? And then I remembered that Arc Thrower could permanently stagger hulks and just like stun lock them. So I went and tested out how the Arc Thrower is now on the hulks, and it does not do what it did before. It kind of flinches the hulks, but it's not that full stagger that you used to get between rounds. Hulks can actually get off shots now between your recharges. So kind of indirectly a nerf to the Arc Thrower by buffing the stagger or the force required to stagger for hulks. Next up is the Quazer Cannon. They've added an additional 5 seconds to the recharge time, so this is going to bring it up to 15 seconds total. So if you're going to be firing 2 shots, you're going to have a 3-second charge to fire, then you have a 15-second cooldown, and then another 3-second charge and your second shot. So it is pretty comparable to the EATs. In fact, the EAT is still going to be quicker. By the time you punch in a stratagem, you call it in, you pick up 2 rockets, you fire them off, you're still going to be able to get an EAT or 2 EATs off before getting 2 Quazer Cannon shots off. Obviously a pretty big nerf. I think there are still obviously advantages and disadvantages for each option. Like the Quazer Cannon in my mind is just for convenience, and if you miss a shot, you know, you have it on you the whole time. But the downside of having the Quazer Cannon is you can't have a support weapon with you, whereas the upside of an EAT is that you can run a support weapon, you call in the EAT when you need it, and you fire off 2 shots. So a pretty big nerf for the Quazer Cannon, but I still think its convenience and ability to take down heavy armor still makes it quite high ranking as a support weapon. Right, surprisingly, the Crossbow had some changes too. They increased the projectile velocity, and this makes it much easier to use. Its function is really good now for aiming and shooting. However, it's still not that good. I don't rate it that well. They reduced the explosion on it too, and I really felt like it needed to have that explosive range. You only have 5 bolts in the magazine. I can't really find a place of this. It feels a lot better to shoot, but still, I don't think it does enough to earn a spot in my loadout. Right, here's a fun one, the Punisher Plasma. I was actually a bit of a fan of this before, even though a lot of people don't like it. I thought it was not bad against the bots. Obviously not as good as the Scorcher or even the Jar Dominator. But now, with the increase of projectile speed, I think it's very usable. It is a lot easier to use, and I think you could run it in builds against bots. This has definitely jumped up a fair bit for me. I want to play around with it a little bit more, see if it can knock off the Scorcher or the Dominator in my build. But I think it's got a spot there now. Right, the Eruptor got hit pretty hard with decreasing the magazines from 12 to 6, so you can't just use it like a primary, even though it is a primary weapon, but it functions more like a support weapon. The splash range is the same, but apparently the damage is less. Now, unfortunately, all my pre-Eruptor footage, I actually had my video camera covering up the health bar, so I couldn't see how much damage I took from it. But the splash damage range is still 6 meters, so it's still got a hefty splash damage on it, but apparently it will do just less damage towards the end of that range. I think you're just going to have to be more careful with the ammo economy. I still think it's a very well balanced weapon, and in the right setup can perform incredibly well. I think if you're an Eruptor lover, it's going to hurt with the magazines, but you know, there's actually a lot of ammo on maps in general that you can pick up ammo from. Right, the Railgun. I think the Railgun needs its own video with its own testing. I know some people have already started to do this. It can one-shot hulks. I mean, it was one-shotting hulks before, so it's still doing good damage against hulks. I haven't tested on charges or wild tons. It's an absolute pain. I haven't tested Railgun in a long time, but I think it'll need its own video to see how this is sitting right now. The heavy machine gun got a third-person crosshair. It went from pretty much not usable to actually usable now. It's not my go-to support weapon, but it can be fun, and at least you can use it now, especially when you're crouching or lying down, and it absolutely shreds bots if you shoot the vents at the back, which is pretty nice. The Diligence counter sniper, this is an interesting one. They improved the damage and ergonomics. I think it is very usable now, and I think in the right build it can be a lot of fun. I think we'll probably see it a little bit more. It is particularly good against the bots. Kind of nice. This is what I wanted from snipers, to be a little bit more snappy. The fact that it has medium armor pen on it helps out a lot as well. I think you could run this in builds. Once again, it's not the best weapon. It's not the meta weapon, but it's very usable now. Alright, the Senator, this was already pretty good. Its goodness was offset by having the reload, and they listened to the community on this one and gave it a speed reload when empty. I think this is probably the best sidearm against the bots right now because it has medium armor pen. You pair it with a ballistic shield, and this is a really nice setup. The speed reload is... Oh yeah, and it got increased damage too, so yeah, the Senator is a top pick. Right, I saw some complaints about the Dominator. Look, I used it a little bit. I didn't really find a huge difference. I have a bunch of pre-recordings before the patch because I was actually working on a video about the Dominator and the Scorcher. I never published that video, but I have like all the damage recordings against bots for it. I functionally didn't see a difference with just using it in a match, but I'd have to check the footage to see if there's any changes there. Right, the guard dog. Now this was incorrectly listed on the Steam notes. It was actually different in the Discord patch notes. The Rover got a 30% reduction in damage, while the standard guard dog got an increase in damage. The Rover now, I mean before the Rover was top tier, it was an excellent pick. Now I think it's probably in the middle of the pack. It definitely, I mean, it still puts in work, but it more or less tickles your enemies rather than taking them out like it did before. You're definitely going to notice it, and I think there are probably some other options now you put above the Rover, so rest in peace. Right, and finally the Airburst rocket. I was surprised with these changes and how effective these changes were. They reduced the proximity radius, and now the gun is actually usable. You can shoot over the top of the heads of enemies without it detonating. So it allows you to target enemies at the back. And because you're constantly being rushed, that's incredibly useful. It's actually pretty fun. And I made a video saying it's hot trash. This one change makes it at least usable. The reload still sucks. It's still a huge downside to have the backpack slot taken up with it. But at the very least, it's usable now. And there you have it. They're the most impactful changes, I think, from the patch notes. If I've missed anything, let me know down below. If you'd like to support the channel and cannot think of a comment, you can just leave the word Rover. Rest in peace. As usual, it's been a pleasure. This is Myelin Games. Peace.